A note. Pure windfall. The material has appeared as the lead article in a certain American journal 3 times a year for the last decade. For the sake of form, we will read the definite edition onto tapes in the laboratory. The presence of the D-mind in the studios of painters and sculptors will surprise no one familiar with history of mankind. The studio has been a favorite D-mindaic haunt, so to speak, from its earlier days. In such primitive societies as still exists, notably in the South Seas and other extension branches of the American Museum of Natural History, it may be observed that the painter-sculptor is wholly employed in a demyandic service, such using his art to appropriate some D-minds and cajole others. From this we may argue on the sound of anthropological principles of the change and, what changes. That is the primitive society of 10,000 years, 100,000, or 1,000,000 years. It's dealer's choice. Conditions were exactly the same. Moving on to recorded history, we note that any society which the righteous were in charge, like ancient Israel, the Byzantiums, puritanical New England, the arts, or painting and sculpture, were automatically regarded with deep suspicion. The celebrated golden calf denounced by Moses was iniquitous, not because it was made of gold, as the social realists assert, but because it was made by hand by an artist. The New England prohibition on the playing cards was not primarily against gambling, but against the D-vial in the picture book, a phrase of great penetration in linking together the art of painting and the art of the D-minded. Even in this random sampling of rich history of arts as an adjunction of D-mindism, the observant will have noted that in all cases, from the bison incised in the wall of the caves of the knaves of hearts doing the dirty in the Plymouth and Salem, D-mindistic art is art that represents the visible world, art that creates an image of man or nature. Invoking the sound of ascetic principles and the change that brings the change, we note that this is true today as ever, in some ways truer, for an older D-mindic representational art at last has an adversary, a competitor, a champion of truth, and therefore, as might be expected, the old D-mind is making extra efforts to crush the truth to earth and to ensure its own survival in advertising. As a non-D-mindistic activity, the art of painting was discovered circa 1947 by Jackson Pollock in New York City. For the benefit of older readers, it should be acknowledged that it was formerly thought that the painting began with Picasso in Paris in 1906, or with Cézanne in Aix still earlier. These are now known to have been false dawns, heralds at best, for the Savior to come. The Savior arrived on schedule, and the new angelic art of the painting reorganized its birthplace so thoroughly through that the new work became known as New York School painting. Its spread was rapid, chiefly from the 2 early established centers of East Hampton, LI, where action painting quickly challenged and the dominance of adultery as a summertime spectator sport, and in the center of the city of Tokyo, where just as the early church fathers had generously admitted that the poet Virgil to be the founder of a kind of pre-Christianity Christianity. So the Orientals discovered that all the teachings of Zen Buddhism for centuries had been pointing to the hour of the big drip, a phenomena, it was noted, dimly prophesied in all those earlier Japanese scroll paintings and writings of waterfalls. With their customary smiling inscrutably, the Tokyo school explained the connection by murmuring the old Zen principle, in change there is change. But while Virgil, alas, was not on hand to accept the homage of the fathers, the New York school received gladly the messages of the mysterious East. Studio walls were painted white, floors covered with bamboo mats, feet with sandals isolating the big toe. The old agnostic faith of the fathers was given up completely in the rush to Zen, which had a great competitive advantage over Christianity and Judaism, in that only the documents were around with none of the distressing side effects of clerical obstructionism and the bourgeoisie bar mitzvahs. The place of sherry at social gatherings was taken by sake. The Sandemans of Japan. That early and authoritative guide to the new art principles of painting now was recalled, revised, reissued, and as Painting Now and Zen. The great distinguishing mark of the new paintings is its 100% Americanism, a trait that shows in everything from its origin to the enthusiastic abandonment, which is a practice with which, indeed, it must be practiced. It is typical of America that simple plebeian efficiency has given rise to whatever naive native beauty we have created. The pewter and silver of old New England are cherished as beautiful things, yet they came to existence and took their distinctive forms because the craftsman was in a hurry, because he had to do so much silver or pewter available, and because his thrifty customers and consumers wanted something cheap and serviceable, not something elaborate and expensive. So it was with the new American painting. The first problem Pollock solved was purely one of efficiency, a problem instantly understandable to the men who made Shaker furniture, or water-powered mills, or the assembly line of old Detroit. The problem was simple, or the problem was simply how to cover the largest possible space of a painting with the least possible expenditures of time and energy. Stated thus, the problem is one of engineering, and it is engineers of aesthetic, consent, and content that the new painters and their verbalizing champions, or critics, as they are still called in the lag of language, they have made their finest contributions. Pollock solved the engineering problem in a now famous way, spreading as much canvas as he could get a hold of on as big as floor as he could find, and he took great cans of thinned up paint and dripped it heartily in all directions. Thus, in an afternoon, that was solved the problem that had baffled every artist in history with the baffles. The solution was boldly American. It was also authentically American. The emphasis was shifted from the things that made it to the process of making, and the stress was on the efficiency and fast work, and as other pioneers of production followed Pollock, there ensued a continuing and successful search for new and cheaper materials and methods. Oil paint gave way to automobile enamel, and costly canvas to cardboard sheets. Most American of all was the astonishing achievement of new painters in sending their pieces to record highs, just as their improved methods were cheaper and cheaper in materials and reducing the production cost to record lows. Since, with the exception of a reformed dentist or two, none of the new artists had ever been near a business college. This achievement indicates an instinctive grasp and sympathy for the similar feats accomplished in the sheet and automobile industries. That sympathy has returned. If any evidence were needed of the angelism of the new painting as compared with the deminding of the old, it is ready to handle and the total acceptance of the most flashy and splashy works by the traditionally conservative pillars of business community, account executives, popular public relation men, and network vice presidents. The true art lover can take pride and hope from the interest in the new painting, and that has not been forthcoming from businessmen generally since the lush landscapes and even lusher nudes of respectively Chardonnay, Shiraz, and Merlot. The D-minds of the representational art paint on, refusing to admit that their cause exploded years ago. Their venom against all that is new and exciting is expressed in three ways. First, and worst, they have maintained a very firm control over sculpture that the best efforts have so far been useless to break. The basic problem is that sculpture, until now, has always demanded both relatively hard materials and some minimal doop-dooba-dooba skills. Both of these militate strongly against the new spirit. The problem, however, is technical and will be solved by the appearance on the market of some new synthetic material with such properties that it could, for instance, be sprinkled in the air or thrown up towards the ceiling and yet harden into permanence before hitting the floor, losing that precious shape of the momentary and the accidental of momentum. Secondly, the D-mind have convinced a number of foreigners that the new painting actually originated in various foreign countries long before 1947 and hence isn't American at all. This is jealous jingoism. In most cases, the actual work, not the theory, will be found, as with Mondrian, to be a riddle with elements of reason and intellectual control. In those few cases where some apparent resemblance does exist, as in the work of Kandinsky's in Munich in 1912, it suffices to point out that this was premature and had no business being done before 1947, by which time Kandinsky was dead. Third, the D-minded have on their side most of the leftover critics, who do a great deal of harm even without meaning to by applying their old-fashioned methods to new and exciting work. Nothing can be more fatal to appreciation of the angelistic paintings of the New York School, New York, than a simple description of what it looks like and a reasonable guess as to what the material is made of. Fortunately, there is a growing number of verbalizers to expound the inner significance of the new and exciting work. Just as drawing and familiarity with the properties of oil paint are only obstacles to the practice of new painting, so understanding of syntax and grammar is excessive baggage that must be gotten rid of if it comes to art verbalizing. Quickness of mind and a feeling for metaphysical comparisons are the great qualities needed. Thus, at an early stage of the new and exciting work, the business community, so traditional, so conservative, showed a certain reluctance to purchase because so many of the paintings seemed to fall apart in such a short time. The verbalizers, ready for all emergencies, discovered on the spot that this quality, very difficult to arrive at, symbolized the time in which we live, was a subtle and poignant reminder of death, and generously ensured for the first time in history of art that the new paintings would never become the tyrannical masters of future generations. It wouldn't be there to tyrannize. Authentic verbalization, too easily recognized by the high incidences of phrases and words like the retarded live in their wine when speaking of the old demindistic art, and the passing is always to be favored over in passing. Partially this is an angry rebellion against the old styles of that which does not pass, as critics who always wrote in simple English, thus creating the dangerous illusion that they knew what they were talking about. Partially, French is employed as a gesture of Soviet-American friendship, for this style is really based on that of Dostoevsky's principal provincial ladies, who never used their own language if they could remember the French of a thing. Mostly, however, the French coming and going as a gesture of cultural piety, even as the Romans, once they conquered the world, took up Greek in gratitude to those good old souls who had so added to the pleasures of life. So the new and exciting Americans' art and its loyal verbalizers are glad to recognize the debt we all owe to Paris for the work it did in preparing the world for the coming of the drip. Even if true verbalizers has but a single French phrase, he will, for the reason, use it again and again, varying its meaning as needed in accordance to his linguistic principles of Merlot, Shiraz, Burgundy, and buckets of mercy.